Take a deep breath. We have participants from around the world, and we welcome you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Dave Ulrich. I'm a professor at the Ross School of Business and a partner at the RBL Group. Julio Zelaya, can I say it right? And I are so privileged to join you along with Jose Miguel and talk with you about a critical issue that we see coming up. We wish we could be with each of you personally to know how you're doing and how you're coping with this unbelievable pandemic and virus and economic and social shutdown that's affecting all of us. We can't. So if you could go to the next slide. We want to begin to think, and if you could go to the next slide, about how to manage remote work. When we talk to executives, we believe at the RBL Group that remote work is a new channel of work. Some of us have done it for decades. I've worked remotely for 30 years. Others, it's a brand new way to go about approaching work. In our work at RBL, we know that in this crisis and others, when things get more pressure, issues around people, talent, around organization, around leadership become so precious. We believe that talent, leadership, and organization issues can be managed through remote work. Next slide. We also believe that the focus of this webinar and others is not on the logistics and tactics. I was reading this morning some incredibly good tips. Work at home, get a physical space. Work at home, get a laptop. Work at home, get dressed. Work at home, blah, blah, blah. By the way, you see my office. We know that stuff. That's the administrative part of working at home. We want to talk to you about how working at home can help us better serve our customers. And the customers of any organization or those outside who are also struggling. But can we create talent, leadership, and organizational solutions to serve our customers well? And so that's what we want to focus on. If you want checklists, I just saw a beautiful one from a company, and there's so many out there from the consulting firms and the advisory groups. Go get the checklist of space and time and dress and food. Look at the ways we can build culture and talent and leadership even while working at home. Next step, next slide. When we've interviewed executives, we have to obviously manage cost. We have to manage the cost of a business. We got to keep our business competitive. On the other hand, we have to manage our people. Not in this short term, what are you going to wear to work, but how do we help them feel a sense of believe, become, and belong? And how do leaders do that? The intersection is culture. If we can manage a company to be competitive and our people to be engaged and productive, through the culture, we create organizations that take care of both their people and their business. And we're finding at RBL that we can do all of those things, even in a remote work setting. Next slide. We've done research on this. This isn't a promotion for RBL. We have a lot of stuff, as do others, to access how to do that. We've got books, we've got consulting, we've got practices. We hope you'll work with us as partners, again, to figure out how do we respond to this crisis through talent, leadership, and organization, even while working at home. And we have tools and exercises that help us do that. Next slide. We've worked with a lot of companies. We're still working with companies in order to turn ideas into impact and to help companies win in the marketplace. Now, this challenge is greater than we've ever seen it. My final caveat before I turn it over to Julio is that we're in triage. And in a state of triage, you don't have time to think, to plan, to anticipate. You simply react. If there's an accident on the road and our son-in-law is a doctor, he stops. He has to do triage to stop the bleeding, to heal, to fix. That's the state we're in. By thinking about working at home triage, those are the administrative things that others have done well, we now begin to move to the state of ambulance and ambulatory care. Then we get to the hospital where we can learn and get stable care. This webinar is designed to give you ideas and tools. Please engage with us in that direction. Next slide. Julio, Dr. Julio, I turn it over to you. Thank you. And I just should say, at a shout out, Julio has done some of the most incredible work in the last 8 days to pull this together. He's looked at hundreds of studies and projects and interviewed clients. And what's really fun is the borders of the world change. Julio happens to work more in Latin America. I work more in North America. I have colleagues in Europe. We don't care where you are. Ideas transverse those boundaries. And Julio, my commendation to you and Ernesto Usher and our team for having put together some great ideas that I hope we can all use. It's yours.
Thank you. So I'll start with the question, what is your trending topic? And according to Google, people are searching for everything related to coronavirus. The searches have gone exponentially up. You see the interest in time, and the world has changed in the last 7 days. And of course, everything is also changing. People are searching for new types of movies. They've changed their consumer habits, and you've seen what happened all around the world. And people are trying to make sense of their fears by looking at movies, by looking at the essentials. So we're seeing customers behaving in ways that we would have not expected in the past. Several industries have changed. If you see the global restaurant demand has grown to a halt. Several restaurants have closed. We will have one of our guest speakers. Part of their business is restaurants, or we'll hear some insights from them. Public entertainment has ceased to exist. Even movies are pushing back their launches, their global launches. The travel industry is fighting for their existence, for survival, and they're doing several things, but all around the world, everything halted in seconds. And lastly, energy consumption. And the proxy for economic activity is significantly lower, even in the countries that are already starting to move forward. So a key insight for leaders in general is when pressure increases, tolerance diminishes. And this is a very key insight because everyone in the world is under pressure. Leaders are trying to make sense of the crisis. People are working from home, trying to make sense of their life with family. And we were not accustomed to something that changed so quickly. And in terms of change management, if you don't know the end of the tunnel, it's very difficult to see hope if you don't know an end date. And that's something that's happening in this crisis in particular. So another trending topic is working from home. Most companies adapted this very rapidly, working from home because of necessity. Social distancing was recommended worldwide, so people are beginning to work from home. And how do you use technology and the processes? And we have learned one key insight. It's not about the technology. It's not only about the process. It's about the culture. It's about the talent. It's about how's your organization to prove that you can do home office. So the impact has a lot of implications. So for example, Zoom, if you see their stock, it has skyrocketed because people are beginning to use their technologies to work more from home. Even the streaming services, they're having to adapt their broadband because it's halting the internet worldwide. So they need to adapt as well. If we see airlines, 90%, 95% of United Airlines flights are caught because of this crisis. So it's a huge impact across several industries. Some are winning and some are struggling very, very hard. So what are our companies doing? McKinsey did a study where they found 5 things companies are doing. The first is trying to protect their workforce. So they're trying to focus on people. The second thing they're doing is try to stabilize the supply chain. With travel disruptions, with plants shutting down all around the world, supply chain becomes a huge topic of interest. Third is customer engagement. How do I get proximity to my customers, understand where they are, and also try to think, how can I serve them better in these times of crisis? The fourth area is financial stress testing, both internally with people and also in the general strategy. And the fifth thing companies are doing is nerve center integration. How do I make sure that I have one channel of communication and spread it across different countries, across different boundaries, and to people that are working from home? So it's a new normal. The world has stopped, and even the Time magazine has several pieces to share how the world is stopping. We see the elderly, we see the unsung heroes helping people. We see people at home, and we see people that are trying to make sense of how everything changed, and very, very rapidly. Some people are comparing this to a third world war because everything's stopping promptly and in an instant. It's a new normal because we had to find new places to work. We have to make sense of how everyone's working. And by the way, I do have pants on. That's not my picture, but we're trying to make sense of a new normal. And one of the challenges is that it's not only working from home, but everyone is at home. So it's a very challenging time in terms of working, trying to make sense of what the world will look like in the future, but also trying to merge with family and with the traditional traditions we had at home. So it's a very challenging time. So this is my family. This is how my house looks like right now. You'll see that my children are studying from home. You see 3 tablets. We're connected. But my biggest challenge has been when I try to teach my dog not to bark during a webinar. And she just laughs. She doesn't understand the new normal. So even how do you leverage the usual pressures we have at work, but also trying to balance with family and with everything else that's happening. So we conducted research, and we asked people, what are you worried about? Both with the CEOs, with people in general. And I would agree with Keisha, it's making us more human. And it's a very positive. We're seeing people that are helping each other and see that we're all equal in these times of need. And it reminds us of something essential. We're all the same, and we're all on it in the same way. So what did we hear on our research? The first is, I'm scared. And even CEOs of companies said, you know, I'm actually scared. I don't know if this will change. I don't know if my company is going to make it. So I'm scared. People were saying this has been the most stressful week ever. And it's because managing multiple things at once. Another verbatim is, I'm tired of talking about this. This is the only thing people are talking about right now. So I'm tired. Let's talk about something else. I will lose my job. People are scared that when this moves forward in the next weeks, people will lose their job because of restructuring of companies. Another verbatim, do schools think we, the parents, are on vacation? So a lot of pressure on schools translated to parents in homeschooling efforts. The other verbatim, I don't know how long this will last. And we as humans need to have a sense of how long will this take. It's like going to a ride with my children. They always ask, are we there yet? And how long is the drive going to be? So we always need to have sense of time, and we don't have that in this crisis in particular. And one final verbatim I heard, this is the end of times, and people that compounds to the pressure. So remember the key insight. When pressure increases, tolerance decreases. So people are under pressure, and everything, even the small things, appear as larger as they seem. Marcial Losada, a famous Chilean psychologist, pinned the Losada ratio. And John Gottman, who studies marriages, also found a key predictor on well-being. And it's very simple. For each bad news you hear, you need at least 6 good news to neutralize 1 bad news. So Marcial Losada found that people that are more optimistic, that are most productive, they seem to have a ratio of more positive versus the negatives. John Gottman found that marriages that stay together, they laugh more, they focus on the positive. So as leaders, we need to make sure, how are we sharing the good news? And I've seen several initiatives in companies, in newsletters, focusing on the good news. Even how the vaccine is advancing, the trials, even new types of treatments, and sharing good news in general. There was one lady, more than 95 years old, that got cured from the coronavirus against all odds. So those good news, how are we sharing them in our organizations, in our families, and in general? What are we listening? What are we reading? What's coming to our minds? So there are current concerns among executives. And our own research, what we did is we led more than 30 in-depth interviews with people from the Entrepreneurs Organization. These are organizations that have a revenue of $1 million plus per year. YPO, they have 12 million plus per year. The Aspen Global Leadership Network, which is all around the world. And these were some of the findings. The first finding is we were not prepared for a home office model. We were testing the idea, and it was a privilege to some to work at home, but not a strategy. So we're not prepared for this. The second is not all jobs fit the home office model. And some of the jobs are on site. They require the traditional way of making business. So they're trying to make sense on how do I exchange this for new technology, and especially in social distancing or in official quarantine spaces. The third verbatim is what will the impact of this crisis have in the culture in the long term? So some companies are worried that if people are working from home, the bonds that you establish working on site with your colleagues might be broken. And we would argue that if culture spreads out to customers, it will spread out in the home office space. So it's boundary-less, the culture. And the last conclusion that people say is, how do we balance the long-term vision with the short-term crisis? And it's cutting the fat, not the muscle, but how do you make those choices? So there have been studies in general, and there was a very excellent study done by these authors that you will see here that asked the same questions to leaders in general. What are your concerns among by working in the home office space? And these were the main challenges executives said. The first is, how do I find the right work-life balance? So how do I make sure that I balance doing business and working at home? The second concern is, how do I manage for overcoming workplace isolation? So it's when we have one-on-one contact with our colleagues, when we have discussions, when we drop in and out on the office space, we feel connected. So how do I overcome workplace isolation? The third is, how do I compensate for a lack of face-to-face communications? Not all communications are perfect. And even the camera, if you have a great resolution, you might not pick up on the social cues. And our brain is hardwired to pick on social cues. We're social beings, but also it's how do you recognize if you're a friend or an enemy? And that's the evolutionary explanation on why do we have that space in our brains to identify social cues. So how do I compensate for that? And lastly, how do I compensate for the lack of visibility? So people are worried that if I'm working from home, people from the office might think I'm not working. But also, how do I make sure that I share the right things? People are worried and say, I need to take pictures to let my managers know I'm working. And even managers say, I'm worried that people might not be working from home. So how do we manage that? So finding the right work-life balance, we see that there's an absence of the traditional boundaries. And especially now that we're doing homeschooling and our whole family is at home, there are no traditional barriers. People might, even right now, my dog could come here and participate in this webinar, or my children. So there's an absence of the traditional boundaries you might have at the office. And the nature of remote work itself, it's different. It's, you have to manage different things using technology, even doing additional steps that you might not do in the traditional sense. So some recommendations for leaders in general. Oh, sorry, and the last one is the psychological pressures associated with remote work. We've covered this before. We have a lot more things coming through. So it's a lot of psychological pressures. And also, to everybody that's a parent, you might know this, that if you're working and your small children might not know you're working. So for them, it's my father or my mother is at home, but they don't want to be with me. So it's a huge psychological toll. So it's how do we manage the additional psychological pressures? So some of the best practices: set remote work norms. So make it official. Say these are the working hours. This is the main channel of communication. I don't expect for everything to be done immediately, but these are the main cues if I expect something to be done immediately. So what you don't clarify, people will invent it. So it's very crucial for us to lead what are the norms for working at home and what's the expectations of the firm. The second is prioritize tasks. Not everything can be done from home or in the same speed that you would do in the traditional workspace. So it's crucial, and particularly in these times of need and in these types of crisis, what's important and what's not. We need to prioritize and make that clear for everybody. This is the target of the company. And in 30 days, we will all work for this task in particular. And the third, recognize the challenges of remote work. It's more challenging. People might be adapting even at home and making sense of the new normal. So it's recognize that it's challenging. The second concern is, how do I overcome workplace isolation? So the first is feeling disconnected and isolated. The second is lack of management action. So here are the recommendations. Promote social interaction among team members. You can do things informally. So even some companies have a private chat when they can share only good news or what are the bloopers from working at home. They're sharing videos. It's like promoting those bonds among team members. When possible and when everything gets to normal, how do you bond the teams in an on-site setting? Even at RBL, we have consultants working all around the world. I work in Latin America, Dave works mainly in the US, Europe, Asia. But last year, we had a one-day meeting when we all met informally, and we had several days to work together. Those days are crucial to build a culture because those compensate for all of the work we're doing offsite. The other is encourage employee pairing and mentoring. These are the times when you can where you can teach other people your best methods, your best practices. How do you share and how do you build culture by having the right conversations? This is the time to pair your talents and make sure you're getting all the right experience translated and built into the culture. And third, check in informally. People like to be noticed. And there are several studies that prove this, that if you change the characteristics in a job, but if you ask people how they're doing, that is very powerful to encourage more participation, more performance. Just check in informally. How are you doing? How are you doing personally? How are you doing with your team? Make sure that people are noticed. And lastly, facilitate entry for new employees. So these are times that if you have somebody that just began working in a company, it's a very challenging time. You don't have the traditional ways of learning the ropes in the business. So it's crucial to foster those characteristics and to care for your people. The other challenge is, how do I compensate the lack of face-to-face communication? And there's two types of trusts when we work in companies. The first one is cognitive trust, which is, I know that this person will deliver the result. And I know this person will be reliable. I trust he or she will deliver the results he or she promised. So that's a cognitive trust. But there's another type of trust, which is the emotional trust, which is, it's a feeling, it's a connection. That's when we establish more bonds with people from our company, we have emotional trust. And the combination of both is what builds culture, also bonds the social networks, but also drives results. So how do we do this in a remote setting? The first is arrange face-to-face meetings. And you can do a Skype meeting, you can do a FaceTime where you can use your camera, and that's face-to-face, especially if there's social distancing. But also you can promote new normal ways of approaching. So when this passes, because this will pass, how do we make sure that we have those on-site meetings? There are companies that have workplace all around the world, and they make sure they meet at least once a year, once for every 2 years, whatever the protocol is in your company, but it's arrange face-to-face meetings. The second is using technology informally. We can share informal things. We can talk about ourselves, what our challenging has been. Not everything needs to be as formal using technology. Not everything needs to be a process. Not everything needs to be work, especially in these times when we need to share how we're feeling in real time. And the third is design visible achievement metrics. So some companies are saying, in crisis mode, we have these 3 priorities, and they have specific KPIs where they're sharing, visibly sharing in scorecards, virtual happy tour. Yeah, that's a great idea. So it's, even companies are saying, we'll have a drink together at this time, and they're doing FaceTimes and they're sharing. They're not working, they're bonding. And I was saying, design visible achievement metrics. So it's, what are your KPIs and how do you share them with your team? And particularly in these times of crisis, how do you make a visible way of tracking metrics? The other challenge is, how do I compensate for the lack of visibility? So there are unrecognized contributions. People might be working at home, but not necessarily being recognized for what they're doing. The other one, that's a great idea, Laura. So get people with a pizza, and that's building culture. Yeah, we're bonding, but we're also learning together. And that's one of the things that, for example, Microsoft does very well under Satya Nadella. It's a growth mindset. culture. So how do we make sure we bond, but also learn together? Performance evaluations. So it's, how are you doing performance evaluations? How are you doing this virtually? How are you making sure that people get noticed, but also get feedback on their contributions? So some of the recommendations: promote individual and team achievements. What is this individual done, but also the team in general? The second, signal management accessibility. This is the time to make sure that people are close to their leaders, because they will look for leaders for official sources of communication. And that's something that's, I expect, for example, from my children to see the way I behave or their mother behaves as official sources. So signal management accessibility in these times of need. And develop best practices. So one of the things that it's crucial in these times, that each company will develop their own language, their own ways of managing the crisis. So it's important to learn together. How do you share what's working in your companies, what's working in other countries? So we asked people, for example, from China, what's working in China? And you will be surprised, these are the best practices. These are the things that are working. And one of the things I heard among participants is communication. People need to, some companies, for example, establish an app, and they are having push notifications via the app on what's happening around the world, around the different locations, etc. So why do some companies thrive and others fail? Some people are asking for the presentation. Yes, it will be available, of course. So why do some companies thrive and others fail? So if I would have asked the question of these companies, we have Best Buy, we have the United States government, we have Automatic, which some of the companies that they have is WordPress or Yahoo. Who would you say failed and succeeded? And when I asked this in general, people would say, oh, the tech companies, they were the ones that thrived, and the United States government, that's the one that failed. But you would be surprised that these are the ones that thrived, Automatic and the US government. And the ones who failed were Yahoo and Best Buy. And you might ask the question, why? So it turns out it all depends on culture, on the general strategy, on the general process, on how they foster talent. And we see culture as an outcome of learning what our key stakeholders want, and how do we build everything, and culture is an outcome. So I'll ask the question, does your company look like this, or does it look like this? So it makes all the difference in the world. Are you a company that's slow to act, that you have like a tank where you're trying to destroy the other companies and you're always in paranoid mode? Or are you agile? Do you work in small teams? Do you make sure everything works rapidly? So in these times of need, and I'll go back to my first insight, when pressure increases, tolerance decreases. So in times of need, if you're a bureaucratic company, working from home will still have this characteristic. But if you're a more agile company, working from home will foster different behaviors. So Sean Graber did a very interesting study on companies that thrived in home office. And he found 3 distinct pieces of the puzzle. The first is coordination. Working from home needs to, you need to be coordinated. Your efforts need to be coordinated, but that's not the only piece of the puzzle. You need the right culture, the right trust processes. And third, the right communication channels, both technology-wise and also the channel, but also the content of the communication, not only formal communication, but also informal communication. So in terms of coordination, what do you need to coordinate in these types of need? The first is job analysis. So it's not every work can be done effectively from home. So you need to categorize jobs in three main areas. One is, I know that this can be done from home. So for example, knowledge workers can work from home. The second is, this cannot be done from home, but you need to have a map on which cannot be done from home. And the third is, I'm not sure. Maybe with new technology, maybe if I do a blended model, this could work. So that's the first thing. The second is IT audits. So in these times of need, you need to make sure that people have the right technology, the right broadband, the right collaborative tools, the right ways of communicating, even messaging systems. Some people will have their own cell phones, but they're blocked to use several social media outlets. So your IT audit is crucial to work from home. The third is norms. People need to make sure they're clear on what the expectations are. So for example, some companies are saying, we'll have every Monday at 8 o'clock a meeting to see how we are. At the RBL group, we're doing it on Saturday. So we're getting together worldwide at 7 o'clock Mountain Time to make sure we're safe. And what are we doing in these times in particular? So what is the norm? And how will I measure performance? So it's not only crisis mode, but also after this passes, how will I measure performance? So working from home needs to make sure that you have clarity in both sides. How will you track performance? In terms of communication, what is the right protocol of communication? So for example, some companies require that people use even their uniforms when talking virtually. It doesn't matter if you're working from home, if you're working with clients, there's a protocol. So what is the official way of communicating? Are you using WhatsApp? Are you using Signal? Are you using Messenger, Zoom, Teams, whatever? The technology is not the crucial part of the equation, but it's the clarity that you have on both sides. What's the channel? What's the right channel to communicate? Which communications require a call? Which communications require an email? What tasks require that we meet, even with a video conference or a face-to-face meeting? And how do you balance formal versus informal? So it's a matter of building trust, both on the cognitive, and I'm delivering the results, but also on the emotional. How do I make sure we connect as humans, not as machines? So even sharing our challenges, our worries are crucial. And last but not least, culture. And culture is believe. It's, and I'll share, believe, become, and belong. And I'll start with belong. Every culture, every company, it's like a tribe. Do I belong here? What's our shared purpose, our shared belief? Do my values are aligned with the values of the company? Do I feel part of something bigger than myself? That is something we need to foster. It doesn't matter if you're away from the company, you need to foster a belong sense inside the organization. The other one is become. It's how do I make sure I'm advancing in the company, that I have more competencies, that I have more tools, that I'm growing as an individual inside the company? How are we as companies providing that sense of advancement that everyone needs? And the third is believe. It's a growth mindset. Based on the very famous Carol Dweck study on mindset, she found that there's two main and core beliefs. One is a fixed mindset. It's, I cannot grow. I was born this way and that's the way we are. And a growth mindset. It's, I can change, our brains can change, I can develop. So is there a growth mindset inside our organization or a fixed mindset? So those are the three main parts of culture. How do you make sure people belong, become, and believe? So our approach as RBL is the outside-in approach. So we need to make sure we listen to our stakeholders. Everything I'm saying, please listen to your stakeholders. Ask what are the differences. Ernesto was pointing out the cultures are different. Can you imagine, for example, in Latin America, we're a very touchy-feely culture, and that's something that's culturally shared. Social distancing for some cultures will be very harder than some other cultures. So please ask your stakeholders. So an example I drew from this company, which was the first in the world to achieve the $1 trillion valuation. And I was amazed on what they did to listen to their stakeholders. They announced a very important news. We updated the emoji bagel. So can you imagine having a company such as Apple hearing to customers saying, I don't like the bagel, and assembling a committee of designers, of engineers, of, I'm guessing people from nutrition, chefs, and they announced to the world, we heard you and we changed the emoji to make it tastier. So we like to practice what we preach. So I had the privilege of inviting one of the people I admire the most. He's a brilliant individual, a brilliant CHRO that he has joined us for today. Jose Miguel Larios will share his insights. He is the CHRO of Multinversiones, is one of Latin America's most important business with more than 46,000 employees. Was just recognized last year in the Harvard Business Review because of their best practices in terms of culture. So Jose Miguel, thank you very much for your generosity, for being here, and for sharing with us your insights on these times of need. Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you, Julio. It's a pleasure to be here and to share with everyone what we've learned. Let me just speak a little bit of the company so that people know who we are. We are a 100-year-old corporation. It's a very diversified company with several business units that range from restaurants, poultry, real estate, renewable energy. So we are in different segments of business. Our revenues are around 3.5 billion. As you said, we have over 40,000 people working with us. We operate in more than 10 countries. And something interesting about the company is that we are a privately held company, and it is currently managed by the third generation of the founder family. And that has a very specific trait to our culture. One of the most important things for the founder family is that the heart of CMI is the company, the heart of CMI is our people. So when we face these type of crises, our main concern is truly the health and well-being of our employees. Currently, we have the last count I did was over 3,000 people working from home, okay? In some business units, this crisis actually doubled or tripled the amount of people working from home. So we're learning as we go along. So we don't have all the answers. We don't have the silver bullet that fixes it all. But we do have some interesting learnings that we've found along the way. But let me speak first about probably the challenges, what we've faced some difficulties with. The first one, how to strike a balance between remote work and being on site with employees and customers. That's a hard one for us. We need to stay at home because of different things, because of government regulations, or simply because we are safer keeping that social distance between ourselves. However, some of our employees are still on site, and some of our customers still need us there. So how to strike that balance has been hard for us. We're trying our best. We're still working with our customers and our employees on a remote way as much as we can, but we need to be there, especially in functions like the HR function. We need to care for people, and I'll speak more about that later. So the first challenge that we found is how to strike the right balance between remote work and being on site with people. The second challenge that we've found is people want to contribute, and that leads to what I've called over collaboration. Okay, they all want to pitch in, they all want to do their best. However, sometimes we've found that people or teams are working on similar initiatives, and we need to find a way to improve how to create synergies in this type of crisis. People are trying to do the same thing, and they're doing it out of their best interest. However, when we're working remotely, it's not that easy to learn that they're working on that. So we need to create ways for our people to actually share their ideas, share their thoughts, and create more synergies across the different business units and geographies. The third challenge that we've faced, having our technology ready for a spike in remote work. That was a hard one. There were things as simple as, do people have laptops? Does everyone have a laptop? And we found that not everyone had a laptop. So we asked people to actually take their desktops home, and we started doing things like that. We started renting laptops. We started doing things differently so that we can help our people work from home. So I would say those are the three challenges that we faced. But let me share with you also probably some things that worked for us so far. The first one, we are learning that when in crisis, I would say commitment is an even stronger predictor of performance. And we are lucky that we have a large people that are very committed to the organization. So we need to trust and we need to care for our people. And when I say trust, we need to trust that people will do what they need to do to keep the ball rolling. We need to help them maintain that commitment, okay? And when commitment is a stronger predictor of performance in times of crisis, we just need to let them do what they do best. Let them work. They will take care of the business. About caring, I would say that ignoring the human need of maintaining meaningful conversations and relations is kind of ignoring the human nature. So we need to talk to our teams. We need to talk to our people. We need to ask them how they are, how their families are. The most important priority for us, as I said, is the health and well-being of our employees. A couple of things that we've done. We're in the process of training very rapidly our line managers on how to ask simple and meaningful questions on a daily basis. We said you need to start your shift by asking how people are, how their families are doing, because otherwise they won't perform as they would. The second thing is that, and I've seen some of the comments in the chat room, we've invited people to have a virtual coffee with members of our leadership team. We have open agendas and take questions from our teams. Here, the thing is to show that we care for our people. So trust and care for your people. Number two, give employees stability and hope. People are scared and we need to face that. And we are also scared, okay? We're part of the bunch of people that we need to find stability and hope. And what we found is that transparency in our communications creates trust and stability. We need to have a clear plan, and having a clear plan long-term in the middle of a crisis is very hard. So instead of trying to plan for the very long term, just establish clear expectations for what you want people to focus on. Keep them informed. Take care of their well-being. Just make sure that they're doing well. and lead from a meaningful purpose. As I said, we are in different business units. We do poultry, we do milling, and if we don't have our people working properly from wherever they are, we might run into supply problems for the whole society, for the whole population in the geographies that we operate in. A third learning that we have as leaders, don't forget to learn as you go along. We don't have all the answers, especially in a crisis that the world had never seen before. So accept that you as a leader don't know everything. Accept that we don't have all the answers. People expect us to lead even in tough times, but letting them know that we are finding out as we go along how to deal with this situation is just as transparent as having clear expectations for them. Some examples of what we've done to keep our leaders in that learning as we go along. We're trying to send videos of our leadership team out to the community, and we are asking them to provide us with feedback. The best ideas sometimes come from the line, and we need to hear them. We need to learn from them as well. We're trying to keep their hopes up. We just launched an unsung heroes video of the people that are actually having to work in our plants, in our sales routes. We are keeping chats with regular updates to let people know what the company is doing, regular electronic communications, sharing news about what the company is donating to the different societies that we operate in. But those are some general ideas. As I said, 3 things we've learned: trust and care, give employees stability and hope, and as leaders, don't forget to learn as you go along. And as I said before, we don't have all the answers. We don't have a silver bullet that fixes it all, but those are the things that work for us, Julio. So back to you.
So thank you very much, Jose Miguel. Thank you for your very wise insights. So in summary, there were 4 common concerns: overcoming workplace isolation, compensating lack of face-to-face communication, finding the right work-life balance, compensating for the lack of visibility, and 3 best practices. How are you providing coordination? What is the right channel, the official ways of communicating? Culture, believe, become, belong. And communication, what's the right channel? What's the right way of doing these relevant conversations? And in coordination, remember the performance. How do we make sure everyone is contributing in these times in particular? And some final thought regarding our own stakeholders. So these are my own stakeholders. And I always ask them, how are we doing? And when I remember this image in particular, when I launched my book on change management, I saw the face of Juan Ignacio reading, and I was very, very happy, since I dedicated the book to them. Seeing this face was for me a very, very happy moment, until I took the picture from a different angle. And I saw this was the reason he was so happy. But this image reminds me on the world we are right now. We might be focusing on the wrong things, and the answers might be right in front of us. This is a time where we need to unite as humans, as a race, and see what are the key important elements. It's not working from home in the process, in the technology. It's really focusing on how do we build a culture that fosters talent, that fosters the best of us in these times. So one last reflection from a poem that was written in a previous crisis, and the people stayed home and they read books and listened and rested and exercised and made art and played games and grew gardens full of fresh food and learned new ways of being and were still and listened more deeply, some meditated, some prayed, some danced, some met the shadows, and the people began to think differently. And the people healed. And in the absence of people living in ignorant, dangerous, mindless, heartless ways, the earth began to heal. And when the danger passed and the people joined together again, they grieved their losses and made new choices and dreamed new images and created new ways to live and heal the earth fully as they had been healed. So I think this is a powerful time for humanity to really be servant leaders, be people that help others in these times of need. So I hope this webinar has been of help. Thank you so much for everyone that has joined. We're at your services. Please keep in touch. Thank you, Jose Miguel. Thank you, Dave. And I'll leave it to Dave with some final thoughts. And thanks again for being here in this webinar. Dave?
Julio, thank you so much. And Jose Miguel. Julio, if you could take off, I'm going to show a screen on my thing that I've created real time. So if you could allow me to share my screen.
Yes.
Thank you so much for what you've done and for the work that you've created. So, you know, this webinar is about making work at home work, but that's not really what it's about. It's about helping your organization win in a crisis through issues of talent, leadership, and organization. So here, as I've been listening to Julio do such a great job, and Julio, I think you're the new Mr. Rogers. That sweater and that smile and that love and your beautiful children. You are our new Mr. Rogers. Thank you. And Jose Miguel, thank you for those examples. If I'm listening to this as a business leader or an HR professional, here's my 5 takeaways. These are the ones I just wrote in the last 5 minutes. Appreciate, recognize the world is changing. This crisis is more than we've ever seen in our lives. 2, simply do triage. You got to react. You got to manage costs, ways of working with customers. If you show up at an accident and you're the medical physician, you do triage. Number 3, attend to HR issues. In this world of a crisis, the way we treat our people, that's talent, the way we manage leadership, and the way we manage our organization and culture becomes so central. They will be magnified for the next 6 months and 6 years. Pay attention to those things. Deal with the 4 challenges Julio laid out so elegantly, and see those 3 opportunities, especially culture, as well as coordination and communication. Our job is to provide HR guidance and to provide a guidance approach to help a company through this crisis so that on the other side, we are stronger and better. That's what we've done. Working at home is a place where we can provide guidance around talent, leadership, and culture to help our company win in these changing times. Let us know if we can help you. We are building at RBL, rbl.ai, a guidance mechanism to do that, but we want to work with you as citizens, as Julio so brilliantly said, of the world. Let us give you guidance that will help you win in this difficult world. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. Let me go back and I'll stop my share, and Julio, if you can end on your share, go back to the sharing you were doing, because it lays out the final slide. I think we're fine. Thank you. We are simply honored to be a part of this great global community of progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. God bless. Bye-bye.